Good afternoon, everybody. How are you today? And welcome to the latest edition of Drew Mania Live. So great to have you with us for this Tuesday, the 5th day of May, the year 2020. And of course, this is yours truly, Andrew Perry, coming to you live and Andrew from the busy streets of New York City. Not so busy as I chat to you what is happening in the world of sports. Well, as usual, we have a lot to get to. But before we get into where we at as far as the COVID-19 pandemic is continuing, obviously, and stuff like that, of what's happening the past weekend. But I would like to start off talking about the passing yesterday of Don Shula at the age of 90, the all-time great Dolphins head coach. And the winningest, still to this day, the winningest coach in the history of the National Football League, have the longest season in NFL history, have the longest season for a coach in NFL history, which is really impressive. His longevity, you can't ignore. The man coached from 1963 to 1969, starting with the Baltimore Colts, and then later on, coached the Miami Dolphins. And let's be honest, put the Dolphins on the map. Because you can't think of the Miami Dolphins without Don Shula. Because when I think of Don Shula, I think of the Miami Dolphins and what he represent. And what he represent as an organization, in the 70s. And he I remember the years when the Dolphins, him and Dan Marino in Miami, him and Dan Marino, the great years. I mean, from the middle of the 90s, which I didn't realize at the time that they was declining, but the Dolphins from probably 93 to 95, or 97, I should say. They always make the playoffs, but for some odd reason, they can't reach the Super Bowl. And from 1984, Don Shula. A lot of people don't realize. I hope a lot of people realize. For a winningest coach, he lost a lot of Super Bowls, but won only 2. He played, like I say, he coached with some great teams with the Baltimore coach, and he coached against Vince Lombardi and Bill Belichick. Let's keep that in mind. A young Bill Belichick when Bill Belichick was the head coach of the Cleveland Browns. So the way I see it right now, Don Shula, the greatest coach in the history of the National Football League, and there's no argument. There's no argument right there. Okay? The no-name defense in the 70s, in the early 70s, 71 to 72 and 73, the power running back that he brought Larry Zonka in. When I think of Don Shula the most, you can't help but think of the 1972 Dolphins. And he has and if I'm not mistaken, he had a pretty good defense against when he coached the Baltimore Colts as well, the Baltimore Colts. Remember, in the 1969 AFL, the 1968, 1969, the late 60s, with the Baltimore Colts, who had a fascinating team, but end up losing to the Green Bay Packers. Shula, again, when I think of Shula, I think of the Miami Dolphins. When I think of Don Shula, I think of the great, more wins than any other coaches, longevity, players respected him, and players respected him, And that's the type of coach. Those are the coaches like that. As I said it in the past podcast. This is the type of coaches that we meet that they need in the NFL. A coach who is a leader, that the players respected and don't really question at all. You know, like he commands the room, and that's what Don Shula does. He commands the room. You don't believe me? Look at the years with the Dolphins. He had a longevity with the Dolphins from the 70s, 80s, you know, the 80s, the years with Dan Marino. The only thing is, I wish he wish he could have bring Dan Marino a Super Bowl. But but listen, they tried every chance they get. But you know, but I don't know him I didn't know him personally, but you know, he was a hell of a coach, man. That's the thing. That's the thing I'm gonna remember when Don Shula. A hell of a coach, man. And of course the 72 Dolphins. Even though the Patriots are gonna be close, I don't think we'll never probably gonna see that again. You know, because it's much tougher. It's much tougher now. Even though, like I said, the Patriots almost did it in 2007, but is to win a lot of games. It was a lot of pressure. It was a lot of pressure. There's no doubt about it. It was a lot of pressure. So we got to keep that in mind, you know, when the 72 with the 72 Dolphins winning all those games. But I respect the hell out of him, and he will surely be missed. As once again, Don Shula passed away at the age of 90. And he lived a long life, you know, But thank God he didn't die because of the coronavirus. Now, moving on. I watched The Last Dance, the Michael Jordan and the Bulls documentary on ESPN, and I remember, and I get a lot of goosebumps where I thought about the Knicks and the Bulls, still to this day, I still think the greatest Eastern Conference playoff matchup of all time. It's not even close. In my opinion, the greatest, best of basketball I have ever seen. The Knicks and the Bulls. I remember watching it I remember watching it with my mom, and I didn't know who to root for, the Knicks or the Bulls. You know, it was one of those series that you didn't know who to vote for. Yes, you would have voted for the Knicks because you wanted the Knicks to go to the finals, but at the same time, you want to join in the Bulls to win, because at the time the Bulls, as they showed you, the Bulls was looking to win their third three-peat. And they touch on one thing. Bird won 2, Magic won 2. Bird never went back-to-back. Magic did. Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls are the only two teams that went back-to-back twice. He's the only one. And he did it twice. He did 3. He's the only player in sports history. Maybe Derek Jeter to win 3 titles back-to-back twice. You know, let's keep that. Let's also keep that. Let's keep that in mind, you know. But anyway, let's also keep that in mind. And watching those games, the Knicks took the Knicks in the 1993 Eastern Conference Finals took a 2-0 lead. Jordan and the Bulls came all the way back because the distraction was at the time that he spent one night. He spent the whole entire night in Atlantic City, and I don't remember how to. I don't really remember how the story goes because I don't want to mix it up and everything. Um, Jordan spent a lot of time, Atlantic City gambling, basically, and and it was a distraction. It was a big deal, and um, and skinny. I forgot what the golf hustler name. I think it was a different story. I'm not too sure I'm not too sure how which story it was and stuff like that. But to keep keep that in mind that he did an interview with Connie Chung, and they was like, oh, he's oh that he, you know, they asked him, did he had a gambling problem, and he simply said no. So he said he don't have a gambling problem, but he loved gambling, which I believe that, and he's not he's not a gambler. He loved to compete. He loved to compete. I know people who gamble who's not a gambler. You know? Gambling is fun. The difference between a gambler and a gambler, gamblers don't bet everything. And gamblers look a certain way. Michael Jordan was never a gambler. Remember, Michael Jordan loved to compete. Let's keep that in mind. Michael Jordan loved to compete. You know? He loved to compete. That's where the thrill came from. You know? That's where he's addicted to competitiveness. Michael Jordan was a competitor. He would kill you to win. That's what made Michael Jordan the greatest NBA player, the greatest athlete in the history of the sport. Period. Period. And it's not even close. So, let's keep that in mind. But that was the big distraction, and plus he had to go to court. He paid James Bowler. They call him Skinny Bowler. He was a golf hustler who was, you know what golf hustlers do, drugs and stuff like that. And Michael Jordan played golf with him, and he was paying $57,000. $50,000 in debt, and 50,000 paid a loan for the $50,000. But one thing Michael Jordan never did, and that's what key. And I just want to throw that out there. Michael Jordan never bet against the Bulls. He never threw away a game. So that's what you keep that in mind, just because of those days. Because right now, compared to today, because you gotta ask guys throwing away games, so you gotta keep that gotta keep that in mind. So Michael Jordan will bet, have fun and stuff like that again, but he never let it get to the point where the league had to step in. It never reached that point. But to make a long story short, Michael Jordan bounced back, won the series, and go to the NBA Finals to face the Phoenix Suns. Charles Barkley, probably his best. You pretty much people, even with Charles Barkley, would say that 93 was his best year because he was the league MVP. He was the league MVP at the time, and You know,